With me today is David Risley, well known in the internet marketing world for his expertise on blogging. David is from Tampa Bay, Florida, and he currently makes a full-time living as a content marketing strategist and online publisher with over 15 years of experience. For the first 10 years, he was exclusively a tech blogger. One of the things that really impresses me about David is that he's a straight shooter and will tell you how this business really works with no get-rich-quick nonsense. He firmly believes, and I agree 100%, that blogs don't make money, businesses do. And he helps a lot of people discover how to create a real business with blogging as an effective marketing tool through his website at the Blog Marketing Academy.
So, hi David, and thank you for being with us here today.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome, my friend. So let's get right into it. And today's topic is blogging for photographers, and more specifically, how photographers can actually use their blog as a marketing vehicle for their business. Now, I know that you've been involved in the blogging thing for quite a long time. You were one of the first adopters of this whole sort of medium. So, I'm really looking forward to sort of getting some of your perspective and all that kind of thing. But let's kind of start with the fundamentals a bit. How would you describe the primary role of a blog in the overall marketing plan for a business?
Primarily lead generation. There's the business aspect, there's the selling and all that type of thing, but just like any business, you've got to get people in the door, and in order to have that opportunity with them. And when it comes to the internet, that is the primary function of the blog, to get people to come out of the woodwork, raise their hands and say, I am interested. And typically the way that they're going to do that is to subscribe to an email list or something like that. That's the primary function of the site, and then everything else, it would be more back end.
And I definitely agree with that. So many people, think, well, the website's there to get my name out there or just to showcase what I do. And really, at the end of the day, the way I look at it, at least, is it just has that one single purpose, and that's to take people whose the only way we know them is an IP address, essentially, and turn them into a real person with an email address or a name or a phone number or something that we can then follow up with. And I think this is where a lot of people are kind of getting stuck, because they expect the website to do too much. I mean, is that something that you would agree with?
Yeah, I think people get stuck in, a guru mindset. It's almost like they, instead of looking at the concrete outcome they want from this website, they're following these social media people who are out there trying to be famous. And at the end of the day, I mean, sure, if you can be famous, great, but that's not really the primary function of the site, because that's the concrete thing that we want here is leads and sales. If you're just out there to try to get famous and float your ego, it's not really a business at that point. So you just got to look at it and make it, this is the concrete thing I want the site to do. And the other stuff is more gravy.
Yeah.
And it is really easy to think, I want to get my name out there. I want to, it's all this stuff that's really hard to measure. So for that reason, I say don't focus so much on that.
Again, I look at the website, you could sort of say, well, a photographer's website falls into at least two parts. You've got the website part, which is things like the more sort of static pages like About Me and Contact Us and all that kind of thing. And then you've got the more sort of dynamic blog side. Mm-hmm. And I kind of look at it like the blog is almost like the living, breathing pulse of the business. Mm-hmm. It's the personality of the business. And people kind of seem to shy away from doing the blogs because they're like, oh, I haven't got time, I haven't got this. And we'll touch a little bit on that in a moment. But, if you could sort of say, what were the top three mistakes that you see most often when you're looking at people's blogging efforts for their business? First
one is I always come down to is not building an email list, because I still, to this day, see a lot of people who are not doing it for whatever reason. It's not a lot of people. I think they shy away from that because they think that the only reason they're going to build a list is so that you can pitch things at people later. And, and there are a lot of people who are not comfortable doing that. But it really goes bigger than that. You're really building leverage for the business with that list. If you don't have it, you've got no way of bringing people back for any purpose whatsoever. So that's the number one thing, is not building an email list and giving people a reason to opt in. The second one, it just comes down to content, and I would imagine a lot of photographers deal with this, and that is what to make content about. And one of the big things that I see with business blogs is that they're just posting content for the sake of posting content. And they're probably hitting their head up against the wall going, what am I going to post? And so I think the big thing that I teach people to orient around is really identifying what the big transformation is that you're delivering to your customer. Like, what is the thing, the raw thing that you're selling them? And then look at it from like a journey on their point. They're starting at point A, wherever that prospect is. You want to get them to point B. Well, what are all the typical roadblocks that are going to go in between? If you know what the business is, you should know what those roadblocks are. And then from there, it's going to expand out like a tree into all the different things that you could write about. And the thing there is it keeps your content relevant to the central thing that your business does, rather than just going all over the place.
So, if we were to put that into the context of, let's say a baby photographer, okay, and so the transformation, as you put it, would be to have some beautiful photographs that commemorate, say, a newborn, and before that time goes away and they're at college, because it kind of goes pretty fast.
Yeah.
And the roadblocks in between, taking them from the point where they think, well, I want to get some photographs of my newborn, maybe, to actually doing it, would be things like dealing with all of the apprehensions that they may have about taking their baby to a photographer, or getting over some of the kind of worries about what might happen or what might not happen. What if the baby does something embarrassing in the studio, which happens a lot. But the photographers don't sweat over it. They don't worry about it because they're so used to it. But moms, especially moms, for the first time, there's a lot of things that they kind of get hung up on that they don't need to, and just educating people through a blog, as you say, would help to get them over those apprehensions and lead them on this little journey, if you like, to the point where they think, what, I'm actually going to do this. This seems not as bad as what I thought it would be, or not as hard, or whatever. I mean, is that a fair sort of interpretation of what you had said?
Yeah, absolutely. But you can see that when you do it that way, for a business blog, your content is going to lead naturally into that call to action at the end of the post, which is, here, I've just handled this one thing that was maybe getting in your way of doing this. Now that we've gotten that, here, why don't you contact me and we'll discuss, going further. And it just leads naturally into it. It's not something where you're having to hit people over the head with a sales pitch. And you're also not sitting there hunting and pecking as to what to post. And
actually, just recently, I put out a new guide called 23 Ideas to Rock Your Photography Blog that gives people, 23 different ideas for different types of blog posts that they could put out there, other than just the usual, here's the photos from my last session kind of thing, because they kind of think, well, I'm getting a bit tired of this. Every time I post, do a session, I post some photos from it, and then, well, what if I don't have any sessions in this week or in the last couple of weeks? I've got nothing to post. Well, there's plenty of topics that they could that they could write about out there, and I just used, a word in that sentence that I think a lot of photographers think is some kind of a swear word, which is the word right. Because photographers are very visual people. So I see a lot of blog posts that consist only of images. You'll go to the site, load up the post, and some of them, quite extreme. You scroll down and it's image after image after image. There's maybe 50 photographs and no text at all in the post. And I don't feel that really, first of all, does justice to the photographer, because I think what happens is that visitors will come and look at maybe the first one or two. Then they start to scroll, and they scroll faster and faster and faster, and everything goes by in a blur until they get to the end, and they'll look at the last one, and then there's no call to action, there's no connection, and people just kind of disappear. So what would be your advice about including, say, the stories of the images in the form of text, and how that could sort of help the reader?
I mean, I think it's a fantastic idea. I mean, the thing about photography is it's an art form, and the photo can often contain an emotion, and I would imagine that most photographers are trying to capture some type of an emotion with the photo. And I think, but it's going to strike everybody differently, just by the nature of it. So I think that when you couple that with the backstory, how that photo came to be, or anything like that, it just makes the photo stand out a lot more. Not only that, I think people resonate with stories a hell of a lot better than just simply an image. The image will resonate with people if they know a story that went with it.
Absolutely. What about including maybe just one? Let's say the photographer took the single best image that they could get from a session and used that as the top image in a post, and then talked about that image and maybe had a testimonial from the client, and then interspersed just a few smaller images throughout the text. Would you say that's better in the sense that less is more when it comes to the photographs as opposed to the relationship with the text?
Yes, I mean it's what you said earlier. The first few images, they'll be like, "Oh, that's cool." But if you post 50 of them, it decreases the meaning of all of them simultaneously, and so overloading it like that is shooting yourself in the foot. Mm-hmm. The other thing is that we the photographers, it's really easy to, well, I'm just going to put a bunch of photos on there because I've already done that, and they're looking for ease. They don't want to have to confront any work of actually writing anything. But the thing is, it's like you're living in your own head at that point. You got to look at it from the perspective of the person on the other side of the screen looking at that website. What do they want to see? What's going to resonate with them? And doing that without text is going to be really difficult. You can't make your own life easier by just throwing a bunch of images up there and expect that it's going to serve a marketing function. It's almost like at that point, like you're just trying to get something up there for the sake of it being there, but it's not really the same thing.
Years ago, one of my first jobs was as a technical writer, writing manuals for computer software and stuff like that.
Fun.
Yeah, it really was. It's the most fun that you can have, without actually having fun.
Yeah.
Years later, when I came to start writing a blog, I kind of immediately fell back into that sort of mode of, well, it's got to be perfect, it's got to be grammatically correct, it's got to be all this and that, and it actually was quite stressful. And then one day, I forget where I picked this information up, but it was, just let it go.
Yep.
It's writing for a blog is completely different to writing, let's say, an essay for a school project. Absolutely. Or a college paper or anything like that. And it wasn't easy to begin with. It was, but I found in the end that if I actually wrote as if I was just having a conversation with somebody, if I was just talking to somebody, and so I would have this kind of almost an imaginary conversation going on in my head, and I just kind of write it down. Mm-hmm. It seemed to come a lot easier. I think that probably a lot of photographers could do that, go through that process, and just kind of let that idea of having to have it perfect just go and relax a little bit more.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people, they probably bring unconsciously all their bad memories from grade school forward into blogging, and it's just not. Nobody's going to take a red highlighter and highlight your blog. It just doesn't work that way, and it's a form of communication, and it should not be any different than you having a conversation with somebody. If you try to make it different than that, more formal, and you're just spinning wheels unnecessarily, and in fact, you'll create crappier blog posts.
Going back to the visual stuff, one of the things that I hear a lot when I'm talking to photographers one-on-one about their websites and blogs and so on, especially when it comes to the way it looks, is they get very insistent on saying things like, well, this has got to be pretty. It's got to be. They use this word clean, and I'm not really sure what that means exactly, but they use this word. It's got to be clean looking. It's got to be pretty. It's got to be stylish, and it's just got to look fantastic. But then I said, well, yeah, but what about the actual function Oh, well, that can kind of fit in with the design somehow. What's your take on all this function versus design?
Yeah, it reminds me of those sites that have the big flash introduction on the homepage, and it's completely useless. Everybody just wants to
Right.
skip it right away.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, obviously in a world of photography, I mean, aesthetics is important, but I bet, and I can tell by what you're saying, that most photographers make way too big a deal out of it. And so you don't want to have an ugly site, but it's not that difficult to make something that looks nice but still functions. And I think function is going to be more important. If you have design, you've got function. Well, it can look pretty and do nothing for you. I think that would be a waste of everybody's time. But if it is functional, but maybe you think it's not the prettiest thing in the world, but still it's functional. It's actually serving a purpose. And not only that, I mean, when it comes to the world of aesthetics and what it looks clean or whatever, it's all a matter of opinion. So just because you think a certain thing as the owner of the site doesn't mean that it's going to strike other people the same way. So I think one of the things that is important is to get out of your own head and think about it from the perspective of the people who are actually going to be looking at the website. And it's really easy to psych yourself out by overthinking that too much. There's this old school design concept called KISS, keep it simple, stupid. And it's very important on a blog. Keep things simple. It doesn't need to be all fancy or impressive visually. It's really easy to get way too bloggy, so to speak, and have this blog that has all these widgets everywhere and all that because you think they're cool. Don't do any of that. Just keep the things simple. Not ugly, but at the same time, don't overthink it because it's really easy to make a site that you go so far in this one direction of trying to make it pretty that it just serves no function for your business.
Last year, I think it was early last year. I read an article somewhere where somebody had mentioned about just get rid of all the stupid widgets that don't really do anything.
Yeah.
Or don't lead people to towards the call to action that you want them to take, and all this kind of thing. And at that time, I looked at my blog and I thought, oh wow, yeah, I can kind of see what they mean. I've got this sidebar and it's got this widget and that widget and all these other tag clouds and all this kind of thing in there.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to just take out the ones that I just don't think are going to help. And in the end, I had one left. I had one widget left in my sidebar, and it looked really, really weird. So after a week or so of looking at it like that, I said, you know what, I'm just going to take my sidebar away. Mm-hmm. And that was when I moved to the full width content and put my, as you called it, my honking great sign-up box on. But it was funny how, when it all boiled down, I couldn't actually find any widgets to put in the sidebar at that time that actually helped.
Yeah, the only one that's really valid from a marketing standpoint would be the opt-in form.
Yeah.
Everything else is pretty much, I'm experimenting with sidebar versus no sidebar. Right now, I've got a sidebar. It's an opt-in. And the other thing right below that is categories, but it's not the widget where it's just here's a drop down of categories. It's specifically just 6 categories that I named a certain way for a particular purpose. In other words, those categories serve a marketing purpose. So the big thing is don't put anything on your site where you don't know the exact reason why it's there.
Excellent advice. And that article, by the way, that you had put up there about the strategic categories.
Right.
I thought that was fantastic. I shared it on my Facebook page, and I'm going to put a link to it in the notes for this episode as well for people in case they missed it, because that to me was one of the most kind of out of the box type of pieces of thinking that I've seen about blogging in quite some time. Because it. And even I had been thinking about categories for a while, on and off, and never really made the leap until I read that article of yours, because I thought, you know what, it's absolutely right. Put your posts into some kind of, not necessarily a logical sequence of, oh, well, these are wedding photos, these are portrait photos, these are high school seniors or whatever. It's the, solving the problem kind of strategy.
Right.
What is it that you want people to either accomplish or understand as a result of the post in that particular category? So I'm going to make sure that I put a link to that article in here so that people can read it. Now, I know that you've done a lot of blog reviews for people, a wide range of those, and I'm sure you've seen everything from one end of the spectrum to the other.
Mm-hmm.
But if you could kind of condense it down, what would you say are the top one or two problems that you see all the time that could have the biggest impact on a blog's success?
Well, the number one problem we were just kind of alluding to, but that is just basically clutter. Just having
Mm-hmm.
lots of clutter on the site. And like I was recently looking at somebody's site he's in a service business and he wants to generate leads like anybody else, but he had the sidebar with some useless stuff on there, like we were talking about. He had this big slider on the home page with sliding these photos across. It really, the sliders generally are just serve no purpose at all,
Mm-hmm.
because they're just these big images that take up a lot of space and they don't do anything. So like, why are they there? And so that's probably the number one issue, is just visual clutter and not looking at it from the main purpose of the site is to get the lead, right? But the thing is, what we're actually funneling here is a person's attention. And that attention it flows kind of like energy. And a person lands on the page, their eyeball is going to land a certain spot. And the design of the site and what you put on there needs to funnel that person into what you want them to do. And anything else that's in the way would be like putting a bunch of, like a guy driving down the road and you're putting all these supermodels on the side of the road. Well, you're probably going to run into something.
Cause a few wrecks doing that.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, if you want the person to get to the goal, then don't put anything in their way. And that's probably the biggest thing, is clutter. The second one is coming down to the content itself. And that is really not I call it packaging, but not really packaging the content in such a way where it's going to stand out to this person who's really not that wedded to your website. For example, headlines, like really boring headlines. If somebody puts a wedding photo up on their blog and they just call it something like wedding photo, who cares, right? That's not a headline. But if you write a headline that actually contains an element of the story maybe in it and strikes their curiosity, it really makes them want to maybe see the photo and read the backstory behind it. That kind of thing is going to be a lot more engaging. So the packaging is important. And the big thing there is to think about it from somebody else's standpoint and not your standpoint. Like, you think everything you put on your site is valuable, but the rest of the world doesn't think that. They've got to be convinced.
Right. And I hear a lot of reasons why people can't or don't want to blog for their business at all. And the top two probably being things like, well, I'm not a writer. I'm a photographer. Remember, I'm a visual person. I'm not a writer. And the other one is, well, I don't have time to blog every day, so I can't fit that in. Do you have any advice to help overcome a couple of those things? That I'm not a writer and I don't have time to blog every day type of obstacles.
Well, the first one is you don't have to blog every day. Nobody said you have to. So I know a lot of people, they come down on that rule like it's some kind of a gospel, but it's just not. I am probably posting 1 to 2 times a week. But even that's not totally necessary. If you're on a business blog, well, actually, really any blog, I think it's more important just to have some kind of frequency. And if it's once a week, it's once a week. If it's once every 2 weeks, whatever. But do something. But you don't. If you're not doing any of it because you don't think you can go all the way to the other extreme and do it every day, well, don't just back it up some. It's not that big of a deal. And as far as I'm not a writer thing, it doesn't make it less necessary. You still have to do it. It's kind of like saying, well, I'm not a salesperson, so I'm just not going to ever sell anything. Well, you're just never going to have a business if you don't sell anything. So it's just sometimes you just have to confront what needs to get done. When it comes to the writing, the more you do it, the better you get at it. So just write more. You'll get better at it. As you were saying earlier, don't overthink it, and just keep things simple. It doesn't. This is not something where you have to. You're not. There's no awards for this stuff. It's really just a matter of, are you getting people to contact you and become a viable lead for your business? That's really the only measurement you've got.
Actually, one of the other bits of advice that I've been giving people is that because they say to me, well, I'm trying to do these blog posts, and I feel like there's only so many times I can put Memphis wedding photographer in a blog post. And they get all hung up on the SEO aspect of their actual blog posts. And so, especially in light of a lot of the changes that have been going on over at Google, which, as we know, is pretty much every day, I just simply say, just don't sweat it. Don't worry about SEO on blog posts, unless you have something very specific that you need or want to rank for, in which case I would probably argue that the post would be better off as a page rather than a post anyway. Then don't bother with it. Just create, compelling headlines, put some good content in there, showcase your best photographs, put testimonials in there, make sure that you engage with the audience and don't bore them to death. And have a call to action at the end.
Yep.
And that's really and link. So for example, if it's a wedding post and you've got a resource page somewhere else on the website that talks about how brides can get makeup tips or something like that, you could link to that article in the blog post and interlink all this stuff together. But this whole sort of, well, I can't do SEO on my blog post, so I'm really confused about it, so I'm not going to do it, isn't really, I don't think, a valid excuse anymore, because it's just not necessary.
Yeah, it's not. And the thing is too, a lot of the first of all, your customer is a human being. They're not a Google spider. So it's kind of like, okay, write for the person that you want to attract. And I think if you do a good job doing that, Google will take care of itself. But this is a people business. This is not a Google SEO business. The other thing is that people, I think, join the club here. SEO is changing all the time. So none of us really get it all. So why are we getting all worked up over it?
Right.
I don't worry about SEO at all on my site. I might drop a keyword into a headline. I do pay attention to the slug, the little URL of the blog post, but I don't try to target any particular keyword with my posts. I write for people, and my traffic is fine. So it's just a matter of I just think that's the way to go. And, as you could probably tell with this whole conversation we're having, I'm a big fan of simplicity. And I think that when people go and try to make things complicated because they're paying attention to 500 gurus out there and driving themselves nuts, it's just going to be paralyzing. And that doesn't serve any purpose at all. So I think run the other direction toward the basics. And, we're writing for people here.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, making that human connection with the audience, especially in this business, in the photography business, I get this all the time. They say, well, I want people to come to my website. They'll see my photographs. They'll see how great I am. They don't always say it quite like that, but they'll love the photography, and then they'll go to the contact page and they'll get in touch with me, and hopefully I get a new client. And it just doesn't work that way, because there's no human connection that's been made in between.
True.
And, I think certainly what I found was, that by putting a lot of emotional content on the site, and that's another phrase that's bandied around a lot and kind of can lose its meaning a little bit if we're not careful. But, it's essentially it's talking to people on a very human level that's meaningful and all that kind of thing. And then that helps to establish the right value. And people just don't seem to be so hung up on finding out, well, how much is it? What's the price? And Because once that happens, then things get very rocky after that point. Once people start talking about, well, how much is a wedding coverage for the day and all this kind of thing, and then it becomes a commodity war, and that's not a...
That's the problem. When all you do is do photos and then depend on a contact page, that is the problem. You're commoditizing yourself up against every other person that does what you do. It's the stories that will make you not a commodity.
We could probably go on this topic for hours, but I want to keep this to a reasonable length, and I'm very respectful of your time. But David, thank you so much. This has been really, really valuable. It's always great to talk with you. You've been a tremendous help to me in my business over the last few years, and I'm really quite privileged to be a member of your academy and all that kind of thing. I really honestly appreciate that. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to do this with us as well.
Not a problem. I always love talking about this stuff. I mean, that's the reason I created a business around it, because it's actually fun for me.
Yeah, and it's some of the people I talk to go, "You actually like all this SEO stuff?" I love this. I love to do the stuff that you hate, so that's fine. So anyway, David, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I know that everyone listening to this is going to get a whole lot out of it. I'll make sure that they know where they can get in touch with you if they have any questions, or if they'd like to find out more about your marketing academy and that kind of thing.
Cool.
And just keep up the good work, okay?
You too. You've got a heck of an opt-in rate with that big honker form, so I'd like to see that thing back on there.
Yeah, that will be making its reappearance very, very, very soon. So you have a great day, David, and I'll talk to you again another time, okay?
Sounds good.